This is Ray Stokes in the oral history section of the Health Sciences Library of the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine on February the 23rd, 1989. It's a distinct privilege on my part today to welcome and recognize Dr. Catherine Kinney Carlton, who is a pioneer DO in the Fort Worth area. Dr. Catherine, I'm going to call you Dr. Catherine. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today, and we want to find out all about the pioneer family that you represent. And I think your mother and father were DOs, so tell us a little bit about your biography, so to speak. Where were you born and all your childhood experiences?
Well, my parents first practiced in Laredo, Texas, on the Mexican border. So naturally, my sister and I spoke Spanish before we did English. That was our first language. Until today, we still speak Spanish. They were in Laredo during the time of the raids of Pancho Villa. And my mother had a horse and buggy, and she'd go out and make her house calls, and they'd say, "Dr. Helen, aren't you afraid you'll get shot by one of Pancho Villa's men?" And
Can I interrupt and ask, did you ever see Pancho?
Not that I remember. But she went right on. She was a woman of great courage. So then they decided that they were going to move out of Laredo, and my father visited Houston and San Antonio and Dallas, but he chose Fort Worth because he liked it. So he came here in 1920. There were only 3 other DOs here then, Dr. Ray, Dr. Walker, and Dr. Maud Russell. So that...
Excuse me, is that Dr. Phil Russell's mother?
Mother, Dr. Phil Russell's mother. So in 1920, my parents invited these 3 DOs to their home, and one evening they sat in the living room and formed what the Tarrant County Association of Osteopathic Physicians. It is now called District 2, but that was in 1920.
1920.
Well, they practiced in the W.T. Wagner building until the bottom of the Depression, and then they had to move to their home. But it was the greatest blessing ever, because it was after that that there was a great migration to the near south side, where it has become the medical center, and about 85% of all the physicians in the city are practicing within an 11-mile radius. So I'm right there. I've been in that corner and practiced there for 50 years.
Now, where is that exactly?
815 West Magnolia. It's the same place I grew up. In 1953, we moved the old home place, and my first husband, Albert Carlton, and I had the office built there, and that's where we practiced. He and I practiced together for 20 years until his death in 1972. Since then, I've been practicing alone.
Mm-hmm. What certifications do you have in your practice?
I'm certified in general practice and also certified by the American Academy of Osteopathy. So I have a good general practice, but mostly my work is a manipulative type of practice. Mm-hmm. And because I can talk Spanish, I get many who cannot speak English.
I understand. Well, you know, it's amazing. Now, today it seems like that a doctor, when he goes into practice, in the first 5 years, he's moved 3 times.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that you've been in the same location for 50 years.
Same.
So you remember, I kind of grew up on the south side of Fort Worth myself, so you relate to the old Taylor Ice Cream Parlor and the Tivoli and the Rockefeller Hamburger Stand.
That's right.
Across the street from
That's
you.
right, where we went to the Tivoli for a dime.
Right, for a dime. Well, tell me, Dr. Catherine, you've had a great interest in the development of TCOM. When did you first become involved with the founders of TCOM? I know you're going to give me their names, and what was your role in the development of the school?
Well, in 1969, Dr. Lubel spoke to me and told me that they were going to establish an osteopathic college here in Fort Worth. It was going to be the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. Mm-hmm. And would I like to teach? And I said, I'll be glad to. And, of course, he said there'll be no money. That's all right. And we all contributed to it because we had a dream. And so the classes began, and you were the very first, and Dr. Hart, and Elizabeth Harris,
right.
Dr. Shunder, and there were a few of us, and we we all had the dream. And then these 17 freshman students came in, and I thought they were remarkable.
Now, just for the record, it was 20.
Was it 20?
20 came and 18 finished. But
Oh, all right.
okay. We had 17 males and 1 female. Maybe that's where you
That's
got the
it.
17.
That's
Go ahead,
it.
excuse me.
But they were remarkable young people. They had the dream as long as when we had the dream.
Right.
So for 5 years, I was head of the Department of Osteopathic Manipulative Medicine.
It's had several names, hadn't it?
Yes, yes, it has.
OT&T and OP&P
That's
and so
right.
forth.
That's right. And of course, I didn't know how to teach. I'd been in practice, but Dr. Ira Rumney from Kirksville told me what to do, and they sent me their books, and so I started with that. Well, after I'd been there about 5 years, Dr. Marion Coy, who was then president, called me in and asked me if I wanted to give up my private practice and go with the college full time. Well, I thought about it and prayed over it, and I turned it down. I said, I've been in private practice too long to just go into a college and give up my private practice.
Right.
So I turned it down, and since then, I've been what they call clinical professor.
Right.
I come in when they call me.
Right. Well, you've had a terrific career, and you've been very involved not only in your profession, but you're also involved in your church.
Very much so.
Well, give us some of your,
Well,
your involvement.
I am a
with the church.
Catholic. I go to St. Mary's Catholic Church, and I've been on their parish council most of the time since it was formed in 1968. And they have given me awards, and I have been, we had a little school there. We had a parochial school, and I was president of the school board the first few years. And I've worked with my church so long, and my religion means an awful lot to me. And I have been fortunate in that I was in the Zana Club. I was president of that, and I worked with the Edna Gladney Home, the young girls there. I got an award for taking them to Mass for 10 years. But I think the finest award I have received, of course, was the Founders Medal from the college in 1983. And then the Knights of Columbus gave me a humanitarian award. The humanitarian award because of my care for the poor little Mexicans.
Right.
Maybe I'm supposed to say Hispanics, but I have great compassion for them because I speak their language and because they're humble and so appreciative, and whatever you do for them, they seem so grateful.
Right.
So anyway, that's part of the reason I got the award.
What other awards have you been given? Yeah, I know you've got a long list, and you're modest, but forget your modesty and list some of the citations and honors that you've received.
In '85, the Business and Professional Women's Club gave me the Businesswoman of the Year award, and then
That was here locally?
Local here, yeah. And then I got a meritorious award from TCOM in '76, and Outstanding Professional Woman in the Zana Club in about '80, and so on and so forth. But I'm fortunate. I'm the luckiest person I know.
Well, bless you. I know something else that you've had 2 marriages.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your marriage with Dr. Elbert, and then your marriage with your current husband.
Well, Albert and I were married for 20 years, and we adopted 3 daughters, and we've educated them, and now we have 7 grandchildren. And he died of a rare blood disease in 1972. And so in '74, I married a fine old friend who had lost his wife, and that was Jean Hightower. So he was the businessman. He was first a teacher, then a principal, then the business manager for the schools for a number of years. Fort Worth Independent School District. And so we have been married now 14 years, and I'm very fortunate. I have had 2 fine men.
Well, one reason why I know you and feel so close to you is that I was fairly close to Elbert, but very close to Gene. I've known him for many years.
Now, I was going to tell you how many DOs are in our family.
That's what I was getting ready to ask you.
Well, sir, we have won an award, hands down, in the profession for the number of DOs in the same family. We have 19 blood relations that are and have been DOs, And if we count Dr. George Lubel, who's a cousin by marriage,
Right.
it'll
Now,
make
Dr.
20.
George Lubel, who is he?
Well, now he is married to my cousin Mary,
Mm-hmm.
and of course he was the brainchild that established this college.
Right.
And then I have a great niece in England who has registered to enter the Osteopathic College in London next September. So if she goes through, that'll make 21.
21.
And my mother and father were instrumental in getting all of them to go.
Well, do you know, Dr. Catherine, is that some kind of a record? Have you done any checking
Oh,
to
yes,
see?
yes.
Is that a record?
In the profession, they have had contests, and I have won hands down twice.
Well, do you hold a record for being in the same location for 50 years?
Well, I never heard of a contest, such a thing, but I bet I would.
Yeah.
I bet there are not many who
I
have.
bet there are not a half a dozen in the country
Yeah, that's right.
that haven't moved at least once.
I must tell you something. I want
Sure.
to say something about my mother. When my sister went to England, England was about to go into war. Her husband was an Englishman, and she told her, she said, "Now, Emily, remember you come from a family of courageous women. Don't make us ashamed of you." And so all during World War II, while Emily was there, and her husband was in the service, and she had to walk fire patrol at night, she said she'd square her shoulders and she'd say, "They're not going to be ashamed of this Texan." Her mother gave her all that courage instead of telling her, "Now do be careful.
Mm-hmm.
You're going into a war. Be careful." That wasn't my mother.
Yeah,
She was a woman of courage.
A woman of courage. Well, she was down on the border for a long time.
Oh, she was a courageous woman.
Yeah.
Very courageous.
Well, tell me, I know in your teaching experience here at TCOM, can you recall some highlight of very memorable experience that you had, particularly in your first year? You have your first 20 students, and you're teaching them 2 or 3 times a week or whatever your schedule was, but isn't there something outstanding that's most memorable that you had to occur or experience?
Well, I remember the first time I met the class.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my.
Where were they meeting at that time? You recall?
We were meeting upstairs on the 5th floor of the
unfinished
of the hospital.
Mhm.
And so Dr. Virginia Ellis had given them the history of osteopathy and so on and so forth. And I faced this class, and there was the librarian, and here were the students, and some of them with tape recorders. I was petrified. But here they were, nice young people, but I became very fond of them. And I was especially impressed with the young lady, the only girl in the
Nelda
class.
Kniff.
Nelda.
Mm-hmm.
Here she was, the courageous young little thing that came into class. Well, sir, you know that we, the DOs all around this area, we used to all come in and teach. And
Right.
it was such a thrill. I'd call them and say, "Will you come in and teach for us next Thursday?" And they'd say they'd be glad to. And they'd come from Dr. Granger from Tyler.
From Tyler. And
Or-
what was Jack's name down at San Angelo?
Wilhelm.
Wilhelm, right.
Yeah,
Right.
used to, it'd take the day or two off and come in and teach for free.
Mhm,
None of
right.
us got anything. Not only that, we helped contribute to the support of the college. So they were great days, and they were fine students, and I still am very fond of them. And if you'd like, I thought I'd give you a little bit of the history of women in medicine.
Well, yes, because I was going to note that you said you were chairman of the what is now manipulative medicine.
Yeah.
But I think the catalog also has you listed as chairman of the history of medicine. So give us a little history of the medicine that you're familiar with.
Well, the most interesting thing is that the first medical school in the United States was formed 10 years before the Revolutionary War.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be year 1765.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. So, of course, that's the prestigious medical school.
Right.
But to say they were prestigious, they wouldn't accept women till the 19th century, till this century. But anyway, so the first woman in the United States that became a physician was Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, and she received her diploma from the Geneva Medical School in New York in 1849, the year of the gold rush.
Right.
So then she went to New York, and there wasn't a hospital that would have her. And she couldn't go in any hospital and practice. She couldn't do any postgraduate work, so she went to Paris, and Paris wouldn't have her. So she went to London, and London gave her some recognition, and she was a great friend of Florence Nightingale.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So eventually she came back, and then her sister followed her, and they established a clinic for women and children. But now we'll jump until the 1980 census. This is 140 years later.
1980, huh?
1980 census. There are 15,000 women physicians in the United States in the 1980s.
Now that's both the osteopathic and allopathic?
In the 1980 census. And most of these women are associated with colleges, with clinics, or on staffs of hospitals. Very few of them are in private practice.
Yeah.
I'm one of them.
You're one of them.
I'm one of them.
Dr. Catherine, you've had a very enviable career and life as well. And I know that there's bound to be something that's outstanding that you feel that you had a finger in the hand, and I guess you feel that way about TCOM.
Oh,
as far
yes.
as that's concerned.
Oh, yes.
But is there anything else that you've been associated with that's that you feel is
Did I help get off the
that
ground?
you help get off the ground? Or
Well, I've encouraged a lot of students to enter the osteopathic colleges.
that's important.
Just lots of them, and have recommended them. And some have gone to Kirksville, and then some have come here. And I see them every once in a while, and I feel like they're my children.
You know, speaking of Kirksville, you remind me of something because, you know, I had the pleasure of listening and hearing you last October the 14th, I believe it was, at your Founders Day out in the cemetery where
Yeah.
Dr. Still is buried.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit about your Founders Day involvement that you have every year. Now, at that time, you were the president of the Alumni Association.
Past president.
Oh, I thought you were president at that given time. Well,
I was
forgive
past
me.
president.
All right.
But at that time, they were honoring the class of 1938.
That's what it was, and you were president of that class.
1938. And so of the class, there were over 100 of us. There were 19 that showed up to our reunion. And I was the only one of the females. There were 5 females in our class, over 100, but I was the only one that showed up at the reunion. And it was so good to see them again. But you know, out of that group, there are only 2 who are still in private practice, full-time. Dr. Bud Mosier, who's in Arizona, and then I'm here. And the rest of them are either part-time, or they're associated with this, or they've retired, or this, that, and the other. But we got to plant a wreath at the grave of Dr. A.T. Still. And in 92 or 3 it is, I think they're going to celebrate 100 years since
92, I believe it would be, wouldn't it?
of the founding of the first osteopathic
Right.
college. And speaking of courage, my mother was one of the early ones to go there. I think she must have entered about 1906 or 7, something like that.
Well, now, your father was president of TOMA
Yeah.
back in 1927, 28.
Yes,
Is
he
that
was.
correct? He
Uh-huh.
was, in other words, he would have been the 28th president
Yes.
of the association.
They were both quite active. They tried so hard to help the profession, and they encouraged students and this, that, and the other. And when they were first planning this hospital, I must tell you, my father was then already deceased, but my mother said, she said, I'll never live to see the osteopathic college here. But she said, you will, and it'll be a gift to the community. And so we put $1,000 in escrow, when $1,000 was a lot of money.
A lot of money,
We
right.
could have put it many places.
Right.
But we did that, and we were very careful. We didn't take any trips. We just worked.
Well, you know, you're one who is honored. You know, there's a plaque on the 8th floor of the administration building, Med Ed 1 we call it, you know.
Yeah.
As you get off the elevator,
Yeah.
it says TCOM Sustainers. Well,
Oh, is
your
that
name's your name's one of those sustainers, you know. You ought to. You haven't seen it?
No, I'll
It's
have
been
to-
up there for some time.
All
I
right.
had it in my custody here for a long time, but I finally conveyed
Yeah.
upon them to mount it over on where people could see it.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Catherine, after, as I said a moment ago, a very enviable career that you've had, and justifiably so, what would you, or how do you feel about, we all want to make some contribution in life, and some of us maybe more than one, but then you've made several, but what would you best like to be remembered for?
Well, Will Rogers once said something that I think is worthwhile. He said, to be a success, first, you must know what you're doing. Second, you must believe in what you're doing. And third, you must love what you're doing so much that you do it for free. And I have, and I've been very fortunate.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you with us today, Dr. Catherine. And you've made my day, as the expression goes. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
This is Ray Stokes.